watching Rogers TV.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. On today's show, do you feel like you're always chasing more? Is the pressure to keep up with those around you impacting your money mindfulness? Do you suffer from money dysmorphia, or are you wondering what that is? Well, my guest today is here to explain it. He's also going to share advice on how you can change your money mindset so you can focus on the awesome stuff and what is most important to you. He's a sought-after speaker, finance educator, and author of the best-selling book, The Golden Quest: Your Journey to a Rich Life. He shared his innovative approach to financial literacy in interviews with TEDx, NBC, Fox News, and Forbes. And he's here now today on Money Matters. David Delisle, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Shannon. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Before we really get into it, can you share a little bit about your background and how you got started in financial education?
Yeah, it's been a long journey because I was one of those weird little kids that was a money nerd when I was 10. I remember reading finance books and getting excited about this kind of stuff. For the Canadians, still remember maybe David Chilton of The Wealthy Barber. I remember he did a book tour and I was even, attended his book tour. So I've always been a bit of a money nerd, but that wasn't really the field I went into. I went into marketing and other things, even though I started investing at a very early age. But I've got two boys that are now 12 and 15. And a few years ago, I just want to pass on knowledge to them. And I realized looking back, what was really important was different than what's really being taught. And I wish I knew things a little bit differently. So that led me to this whole financial literacy, writing a graphic novel for kids, and really trying to change the way we talk about money.
Well, it's an interesting background that you have when you say you started very young. Not a lot of people would say that. So I like that you say you call yourself a money nerd. So that's good. Well, I want to get into right off the bat, what is money dysmorphia?
Yeah, so it sounds like a big word, but all it is when your perception of your finances doesn't match reality. That's all it is. So it's common when you see people where they might feel extremely poor and they don't have enough and they're scared everyone else has more than them, when actually that's not the reality. So it's those types of things. But the reason it's really important right now is we all had a little bit of money dysmorphia in the past, but we're noticing now with Gen Z, over half of Gen Z suffers from money dysmorphia, and it's getting worse with the generations afterwards. So it's becoming one of these things that's becoming more and more important.
What are some of the sort of common behaviors when it comes to money dysmorphia?
Yeah, so it's interesting because you'll see both ends of the spectrum. So we know those people who are just hoarders and they just always have this fear around money. It doesn't matter how much they have. Like I mentioned, they just feel scared, like they don't have enough. And then you have people on the other end of the spectrum that have this idea of, you know what, I'll never have enough money. All these other people have more. You only live once. I just got to spend it all and not plan for their future. But in either case, really what's happening is they're not planning very well for the future. And they're just their whole views and perception of what they have, what they need, and what money is distorted.
So I meet most commonly with the people that are on the spectrum of, I feel like I don't have enough money. And when I have those conversations with people, I often start with, well, can you tell me what your income is? Well, sometimes they can, often they can't. They have a general idea of what the income might be, but it's very vague. And then same thing on the expenses side. Can you tell me how much you spend on this or over here? Some expenses, people often know exactly what their car payment is, but they don't know how much they spend on groceries for the month. And so those are the types of people that I sort of meet with on a regular basis. And, we're influenced by a lot of external sources. It's like you mentioned, it's looking at the people around us and comparing ourselves. But, with the added influence of social media, it seems to have just exploded. And like you say, with Gen Z, it's becoming more and more that way as the generations pass by. What is your advice on handling those external influences?
So yeah, those external influences are so scary because that's keeping up with the Joneses. But for us, the Joneses were like our neighbors, our friends, our family. Now it's everybody in the world. So that's a big change. And so the biggest thing, and this is why I'm so passionate about this, it's easy. We just start talking to our kids about money. So if you think about our children and we want to teach them the value of money, but we never talk about money or how much things cost, they'll never they'll never understand. So all of the information they're learning about financial literacy is coming from these external sources like social media. But I tell parents, like, when you go to a grocery store, let your kids know how much things cost when you buy, like, fill up that basket, when you go to McDonald's, when you fill up your car with gas, all these simple things. And then they'll start to, at the very least, get that concept of the value of money. And that can happen at a really young age.
And so it seems that you're saying that the our money dysmorphia is really tied to our financial knowledge. So the more we know, perhaps the more we might be able to manage that disconnect.
For sure. And right now, like the narrative, and it's not just social media, it's almost everybody, it's more is better. More means you're smarter, more means you're happier, more means you're more successful. And that's what we see. We see people on beaches and yachts and happy and friends and laughter and all this stuff around them. And we're like, why? That's not me. Why can't I have that? I need more. And that's just not true. I mean, more, we've seen time and time again, if more made everyone better and happier and all these things, then our billionaires would be the happiest people we know. But that's not the case. So more isn't more, but that's what we're being sold. And that's what's really creating this dysmorphia.
Well, and you mentioned about having those discussions with our kids. And so that leads us really nicely into just talking about your book, which is now a bestseller. It's called The Golden Quest: Your Journey to a Rich Life. And it's a graphic novel about a young boy who embarks on a hero's journey with his dog to discover the golden rules of money. So, can you talk a little bit about the inspiration behind the book?
Yeah, so I wanted to write something for my kids, but again, it's my kids. So it was going to be something that was going to be extremely boring and they just have to read it anyway. And I'm used to being a money nerd and people just ignoring everything I say. And you see the eyes roll and look off in the distance as soon as you start talking about money. And then I realized kids, what they're reading these days is they're reading graphic novels. That's what they're interested in. And it shocked me that this is still the only graphic novel that teaches financial literacy, but it just makes it so much sense to just make it a fun adventure. And my, like, the best praise I get is from parents where their kids read it and don't even realize that they were learning anything or that it was about money or that they're being taught. It's this Trojan horse to really teach these values to kids without them realizing.
I completely agree with you about the format of the graphic novel because my daughter's only 6 and those are the formats that she gravitates towards. So I like that choice of format. Can you tell us a little bit about the money lessons that are learned in the book?
Yeah, so a lot of it, there's only really four key lessons in the book. But the first one, which I find is the most important, and this leads into what we're talking about with money dysmorphia, is really understanding what's important to you. So the lessons: only buy the awesome stuff. And it's one of those things where when you first hear it, and the kid in the book as well, it's like, everything I have is awesome. Come on, David, give me a better lesson here. But this comes back to really understanding what's important to you. And unfortunately, a lot of times we realize that in tragedy, when something bad happens, what's really important. This is trying to get you to just focus on that on a regular basis and ask that question: is this my awesome stuff? Does this bring me joy? And I like to say, like, the more you focus on what brings you joy, the more you'll realize what doesn't. And we're spending time and money on things that don't actually bring us joy.
It's so true. It's hard to sometimes determine what those things are, like you mentioned. And we're going to sort of touch on that in the second portion of the show. So there's lots of valuable lessons to learn from your book, and not only for kids, I think, but also for the parents who might be presenting it to their kids. And of course, we're heading into November, which is Financial Literacy Month, and so it's something that parents watching may want to consider picking up as a teaching tool. And of course, the theme for this year's Financial Literacy Month is money on your mind, talk about it. Now, sometimes that's easier said than done, I think. How do you feel about this?
It, this is like the point of the book to me isn't to give it to your kids, it's to sit down and read it with them and have these conversations. The whole thing is meant to inspire conversations. And that's when I talked about trying to teach money a different way. Right now, I find a lot of times people are being told what to do, and it's a very harsh, like there's a lot of shame and judgment in it. For me, it should be discussion and curiosity and conversation, and just start talking to your kids. And all of these are great opportunities. I mean, I talk to my kids all the time and give them a bit more say in how we spend money, what choices we make, what our priorities are, what our values are.
It used to be that it was a very taboo subject, talking about money within the home. Do you think that has shifted a little bit over the last few decades?
No, unfortunately, that's the thing is it's still so taboo. I mean, we know more about, people's sex lives than their finances. If you think about your friends, like you don't know what they earn, you don't know the debt they have, you don't know what they, spend or how much they've saved. Like we just don't talk about it. And the a main reason is because there's so much shame and judgment tied into money that we just don't touch those conversations. But I think the best way to overcome that shame and judgment and the literacy and knowledge is by talking about it. So I really want to see that shift, but it's still fairly taboo.
It's interesting because, like I mentioned, I meet with a lot of people on a daily basis, and I agree with you that that discussion about shame, especially if someone feels that they have mismanaged their finances in some way, I think is that's a tough roadblock for a lot of people. A lot of people, though, that I see often, yes, there can be a little bit of that money dysmorphia issue where we don't really know, we have that disconnect with what's happening with our own income and expenses. Um, but I think also a lot of circumstances change for people just unexpectedly. And so if you're dealing with a lot of debt, and that sort of heavy burden, a lot of that can sort of be as a result, or maybe a combination of uh, a little bit of mismanagement of the funds, but also then something uh, triggers, like there's some kind of event, a marital breakdown, something like that, and I think you're right. There's a lot of shame that comes along with those types of experience, which is makes it difficult to talk about, I think.
For sure. And that's what's so important about this is if you start talking about it, you're aware of the different choices you actually have. And that shame and poor choices usually comes from a lack of awareness, not because you're a bad person.
Yeah. Well, I know your ultimate goal is really to change the money mindset and make it easier to talk about money. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when Money Matters returns after the break.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Mo.
The moustache is calling. Raise funds, save lives. Donate at Movember.com.
With Rogers TV, you can cheer on the home team from the comfort of your living room. We'll head to the rink, the field, the court, or the pitch, so you don't have to. Tune in and cheer on your local amateur athletes on Rogers TV.
Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is David Delisle, sought-after speaker, finance educator, and best-selling author of The Golden Quest, Your Journey to a Rich Life. And as we talked about in the first half of the show, David, your book really is a tool for teaching financial literacy. And with Financial Literacy Month upon us, it's certainly top of mind. And you also, though, provide a lot of finance-themed workshops. Your focus is to change the money mindset, make it easier to talk about money. And I want to draw on your knowledge and have you share some of your mindful money lessons to our viewers and how we can start to have those conversations, especially with our children. So what is your advice about starting those conversations with our kids?
Yeah, so it's going to be a little bit different at different ages. And so, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, just talking about the value of money, so important when kids are really young and just getting them just aware of what things might cost. But one of my favorite lessons, and this is a lesson for adults as well, is that first golden rule in the book: is this my awesome stuff? Asking that question. So when you're looking at purchasing something, and what you'll start noticing is that awesome stuff, like what brings you joy, it can be experiences as well. So I sort of like to walk people through a bit of a journey. So thinking about their favorite memory, thinking about the time they last laughed with their friends, all of these things. And you'll see it almost becomes a game because that awesome stuff becomes a benchmark. Like that's the thing that brings you the most joy. And it's interesting. I have so many conversations with people where they tell me this is their awesome stuff, and over time realize it wasn't. It's something else is really important. And this is how we really sort of break that attachment to money that we have, where we're chasing something that's never actually going to make us happy.
Do you have a bit of a strategy, depending, like you mentioned, it's different on age levels? Maybe starting with our youngest children, do you have a strategy to start the conversation with them?
Yeah, so this is where you could really, like as a parent, get involved with the conversation. So you could just start asking them, like, what is your awesome stuff? And then start telling them what your awesome stuff is. That's really important, is let them know what's important to you, so everyone can start to see it and then see how it shifts and changes. And it does sound like it's tricky. And I get this from kids all the time. Like, I don't know what my awesome stuff is. But the thing is, most of us really do know. Like if we think of as parents, our kids, we know what their favorite, toy or stuffy or thing is, or blanket that they need to have. And if we lost that thing, we know there's no way to replace it. And there'd be a massive crisis. We know what those things are. It's not all the stuff hidden under the bed or in the closet. And again, that's on the stuff side of things. But kids will start to notice too, like, no, you know what I really want to do? I just want to go for a bike ride, or I want to go to the beach, or I love to play basketball. And as you start throwing these things their way, they'll start realizing that's when I have the most fun. That's what I enjoy. And it's not chasing all these other things.
And when I think about those different age groups between our young children into the teenage years and then into young adult, I obviously, your awesome stuff is going to change as you progress through those years. So I'm thinking the younger children, it's going to be stuff. It's going to be something physical that they can see. And perhaps as we get older, it becomes more of those experience types of things, which gives us that positive feeling. Is that sort of a trend that you see?
For sure. But what's shocking is that kids make that transition quicker than you think they would, because they're starting to realize it. So as an example, this past holiday season, Christmas, my boys, typically we just filled the tree full of presents, but they're not necessarily presents they love. They're just presents they want. And so this time, I again had the conversation. I asked them, like, we could do that, or instead, would you like to host your own Christmas party for you and all your friends, like individual Christmas parties? And that's something they got super excited about, because they realized, like, that's what they want to do. Like that's a fun holiday to them. Is we'd go to the store and get all the candy and all the food and the decorations and invite all their friends, and they can just have this big Christmas party, as opposed to a bunch of things that they didn't really want. And it's really neat to see, because with my boys, that's a big thing, is they're very different in how they spend. One's a spender, one's a saver. They're very different in how they think about money, but both of them, like, they're not trying to chase what their friends have or feeling that envy or keeping up with the Joneses, because they know what's really important to them. And usually it's connection, it's friends, it's family.
David, in one of your other workshops, you talk about the importance of the money conversation as an entire family. So, can you talk about why you feel that that's important?
Yeah, well, kids don't really understand what's going on. So, like, a common thing, we'd see them we're in the grocery store and a kid starts having a tantrum, wants like a candy or an ice cream. And our response might be, well, we can't afford that. But we really can afford it. It was an ice cream. Most families can afford the ice cream. It's that we choose not to buy it because that's maybe not what we value, or we think it's overpriced. There's all these other reasons. But little kids don't necessarily know that. So then they all of a sudden grow up with this fear that, low self-worth, or my family's poor, or they're scared that you're going to lose the house because there's no money. So just involving the kids a bit more in the dialogue, like your own internal dialogue. You know what? I don't want to go to this restaurant because it's really expensive. And instead, I'd rather use the money to do this. Or we're saving up to send your mom to school. So that's become our priority, or this trip we're doing. And kids can get behind it, especially if they're like, well, I don't want to do that. I'd rather do this other thing. Even those things, you can start involving them, because a lot of times as parents, we impose what we think they'd like an expensive trip to Disneyland. They don't realize how expensive that trip actually is and what they could do instead. And so they're not going to be as appreciative because they have no concept of the actual cost of that. So involving them gets them to actually appreciate things a bit more and feel like they have some autonomy.
Are there certain topics that families can talk about, or should we just sort of think about just being specific and direct in our conversations?
For me, I'm all about ease. Like I'm a single parent, so I want to make parenting as easy as possible. So I'm not sitting down with my kids or trying to game the system or come up with big topics. I'm just noticing as it comes up and there's opportunities, just weaving it into the conversation. So if there's, a great example would be like summer holidays, and somebody was asking about how to budget because it's so expensive. They have all these summer camps, all these sports, all these things they want to do. Again, just having that conversation with the kids, instead of saying, this is what we're doing, start talking to them. Hey, we can only pick one camp, or this is, we could go with all our friends and, go camping for a week, or we can, spend a day at this theme park, and just easily just bringing them into the conversation, seeing what they think. And then you can guide them. You can let them know what you think and why. But I'm really trying to take judgment out of the conversation around money. And this is how we start to do that. There is no right or wrong answer. It's just letting people know what choices they actually have. And once kids realize what choices they have, they can start making better choices.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with that. Now, one of your other workshops is all about investing, which I think can be a bit of an intimidating discussion that a lot of people have. Why do you think it's a difficult thing for people to grasp?
I mean, it comes back to the shame. So people don't ask questions and they feel like they should know everything to do with investing. But that's just not the case. I mean, that's not the case with our doctors and our dentists and our car mechanics. Like, we know there's people that know more than us. Investing is one of those things where we just have this fear and shame around. And that's why when I talk about it, I try to just show how simple it actually can be. And you can find people to help you with the difficult stuff. Like, it's your habits and your mindset. That's going to have the biggest impact on your wealth, not the specifics, because there's people who can help you with that. And for long-term investments, there's ways to actually, create boring but amazing investments. And that's the thing, is we all want something that's, flashy and fun and exciting. Those aren't good long-term investments.
So while I was sort of preparing for the interview today, I watched some of your other interviews online, and you've been talking about the awesome stuff. And you make this comment that by discovering what is truly your awesome stuff, you will experience a new way to think and feel about money, because it will be focused on what is most important to you. So can you walk us through how can we determine what our awesome stuff is?
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's a game and constantly just asking that question. But where it gets exciting, so as an example, I remember being in an interview and the host told me that his awesome stuff was this soundboard that he wanted to buy and he's super excited about it. But then in the conversation, because I realized when he talked about it, he wasn't that excited. He was just like, this is what he wanted, and he did want it. But he got so much more passionate when he talked about his family. So I started asking about his kids, and he had 2 daughters, and they just gone on a trip recently. It was the first time they flew on a plane, and you could just see him getting more and more excited as he talked about this. And the reason this sticks out so much for me is because in the midst of that conversation, you can almost see that light bulb, like in a cartoon above his head, where he realized, oh, this is actually my awesome stuff. It's my daughters. It's traveling with my daughters. It's spending time with my daughters. It's not the soundboard. And the reason this is so important is because everything we've been taught right now is around sacrifice. So a good person's going to sacrifice, not buy the soundboard, save up, and eventually they'll buy it. But it's all this like delayed gratification and compromise. Whereas when you really understand what's important to you, like for him in this case, the soundboard no longer has the same value as spending time with his daughters. So it's not a sacrifice. It's something that's just not as important, and it loses a lot of its energy.
Well, you've certainly been creating a movement, and the awesome stuff movement seems to be catching on. Can you tell us a little bit about this, what this movement is, and about a challenge you might have for people?
Yeah, so it's really getting you to become more aware. So I have this 7-day awesome stuff challenge, which for 7 days, you just simply ask before you buy something, is this my awesome stuff? And feel into it, feel into that feeling and see how it makes you feel. Like that's like you're asking about how you figure out what is your awesome stuff. How does it make you feel? How excited are you about this? And it doesn't matter what the answer is. So ask the question, pause for a second, ask the question. If it's your awesome stuff, buy it. If it isn't, don't. And just do that for 7 days. And you'll notice all of a sudden the things that are important to you, they will start to shift and change. And especially get 2 or 3 friends and family members to join you in the challenge. And that's how we start spreading this and really changing the way we think and feel about money. It sounds simple, and it is, but it's a journey that it'll take time. And it's one of those things where it's just you'll constantly grow.
Yes, and I think if you're asking yourself that question really with anything that you're spending money on, and so my personal struggle is I like going out for lunch. I don't like packing my own lunch. I don't like making it. I despise it. But if I ask myself if I'm going through the drive-through, is this my awesome stuff? I might be able to change my mind. You know what I mean? And maybe break that habit and put a little bit more money back in my pocket. So, David, I really appreciate everything that you've talked about today and all of your great advice. If anyone wants to connect with you, how can they do that?
The best place to find me, again, everything's based around the awesome stuff. So theawesomestuff.com. You'll be able to find me on Instagram. I'm at the awesome stuff. You can find the book at your local bookstores or Amazon. It's called The Golden Quest. And really reach out. I mean, I'm going in and speaking at schools. I love answering questions. So if anyone comes across any of my contact information, let me know and reach out.
Well, thank you again for being here, and I really appreciate all of our viewers for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Today, I helped a parent feed their family by connecting them to a food program.
Today, I helped someone connect with mental health supports.
Today, I helped a couple struggling to pay their bills access financial aid.
Every day, 211 navigators connect Canadians to critical government and community programs and services.